Thanks for joining me again on Stand on Guard. This is your host, David Crayden, and I'm broadcasting to you live from your nation's capital in Ottawa. I've got a lot to talk about today. I showed you that at the beginning because every show of Stand on Guard will have at least a few minutes devoted to the crisis at Universal Ostrich Farms, where Katie Passatney and her family are being oppressed, attacked, and assaulted with the CFIA. We'll be back in a minute.
The Prime Minister lied and his minions continue to lie.
Your home is your castle. We're calling on the government to introduce and immediately pass the Stand on Guard law.
But we also need to resolve to resist.
Okay.
We'll do it live.
Okay.
Well,
No.
we'll do it live. I'll write it and we'll do it live.
Yes, we're doing it live, and that's how we do it here every day. Thanks for watching. A lot of folks are saying, spend a little more time on the Ottawa beat, and the parliamentary beat, and I try to do that. Maybe I haven't doing enough of it, but we'll be discussing that. I've got some information to share with you later about Universal Ostrich Farms and Katie and everything else that's going on out there. But I wanted to open up today with the potential for a federal election. Official opposition leader and conservative leader Pierre Poilievre met with Mark Carney, Prime Minister Mark Carney, yesterday. Here's how he emerged from that meeting.
Anything to change your mind?
Well, we had a good conversation. My message, of course, to the Prime Minister is that people can't afford to pay anymore, that they're tapped out, their grocery bills, their rent is too high after 10 years of excess spending. So I shared my view that we need the government to bring down its inflationary deficits and taxes. I was grateful for the chance to sit down with the Prime Minister. We had a good conversation. He didn't make any commitments, and so I'm looking forward to seeing what he comes up with.
You said you hoped he was in listening mode. Did you feel that was the case?
I think we both were. We had a good back and forth, and we shared our respective views. I'm not going to report to you anything that he said because that was in the four walls of the room. I can only speak for myself, and I reiterated that we need this to be an affordable budget. We've seen over the last 10 years of Liberal deficit spending is driven up the cost of living and driven down investment in our country. So my message is it's time to reverse course on the costly decade of deficit spending that has given us more expensive food and housing. The Canadian people deserve a break. The cost of government is driving up the cost of living, and so if the Prime Minister is serious about making Canada a more affordable country, then he needs to bring forward an affordable budget.
Do you get the sense this is a budget that you can support?
Sorry, go ahead.
We can take both.
Okay, you go first.
Do you get the sense that this is a budget you could support?
I haven't seen anything, but I've sort of laid out my conditions for the party, and we'll see what he comes up with.
I mean, history, though, is that opposition parties, official opposition parties, do not support the budget. I mean, you just don't. It's not part of your job. So do you know what I mean? Do you see a world in which this is possible for you?
The world would be it's an affordable budget that gets rid of taxes, excess taxes on investment, home building, work, energy, that brings the deficit down to the level that the Liberals promised only a year ago. Pretty reasonable to go back to the deficit they were running only a year ago. These are the things that he would have to do for us to consider it. At the end of the day, our number one priority is people's take-home pay has to grow, and that comes through more affordable food and homes. The current Liberal policy is driving up the cost of living. If they sharply reverse that, then they can bring down the cost of living. And that's what I asked for with this meeting with the Prime Minister.
Just I'm just curious, after meeting with them, what are your impressions as far as where the deficit might go?
I didn't press him too hard, but you know, the spending has been out of control since he took office. And in a lot of ways, he's spending faster and more than the Liberal government was when he became Prime Minister. Spending on the bureaucracy is up 6%. On consultants, it's up 37%. It seems like he's got a new agency for every problem in Canada. It's going to be an alphabet soup of different acronyms around the city. And so my sense is that his spending, Mr. Carney's spending, with great respect, is totally out of control. And Canadians are paying the price for his out of control spending.
What do you say?
So why not press him a little bit further on it?
Well, I didn't expect I would get an answer to that question in this meeting. And if I did, I'm not going to repeat things he said to me in private anyway.
There seems to be like a shift in the narrative where it used to be the job of the government was, in a minority situation, was to convince the opposition to support the budget. And instead it's become, it is the opposition's fault if you don't support the budget. And I just wonder if you could reflect on that tension, like this idea that if Canadians truly do expect, in a minority situation, everybody to work together, then where is it with all your parties to sort of sit down and hammer this out, or who owns that ultimately?
I think it'll be up to the Canadian people to judge when they see the substance and measure it against the votes. But what I've tried to do is be fair-minded and just holding him to the promises that he made. You know, it was a year ago the Liberals promised this year's deficit would only be $42 billion. So I don't think it's that unreasonable to expect that they would keep that cap. He said he would be judged by the prices at the grocery store. Well, those prices are rising at 4% now, twice the Bank of Canada's target rate. My goal is to bring that food price inflation down. He said that he would make he would create jobs. So we're putting forward policies that would actually do that. So I think we've been very reasonable in basically insisting that the Prime Minister live up to the very big promises that he made of himself. And for me, the biggest and most important promise of it all is that people can actually start to afford their lives again.
Do you get the sense he wants an election out of this?
We didn't discuss that. But all right, thanks very much, everybody.
We didn't discuss that. Notice how Pierre Poilievre starts over here, at the beginning of that news conference, or the scrum. Very conciliatory, and it's all about the budget doesn't sound that bad. Finally, in about 75% into that scrum, he gets a little more combative against the Carney government. But he comes out of that meeting all smiles. And do you think Pierre Poilievre is smiling because he's that enthused about the budget? Or do you think Pierre Poilievre is smiling because potentially he smells an election? Now, the reporters finally get to that question. It's the last question. Pierre Poilievre says, we never discussed that. I don't believe that. I think they discussed it. I think that's why he's smiling. I do believe Mark Carney wants an election because he thinks he can win it. Let's listen to the Liberal House Leader remarks, and I'll come right back with some polling to show you.
We don't think Canadians want an election, but election there will be.
Well, a lot of you want an election. And here's a poll I took here on Stand on Guard. 92% of you who responded said, yes, I want an election called in the near future. Only 8% of you said no, or I don't really care. That's very interesting. Let's have a look at some of the polling, recent polling, and what it means, because this could go in a variety of directions. Now, based on the numbers here, I have to put my glasses on. This is not good news for the Conservatives, even though they have 158 seats versus 150 seats for the Liberals. That would mean a drop of 19 for the Liberals and an increase of 14 for the Liberals. This is an Abacus poll. Came out late last week, early this week. But notice the crucial factor in all of these polls is, where does the NDP sit? because the NDP essentially holds the balance of power right now with 7 seats. It's not even an official party. I don't think the Bloc wants an election. There's nothing in a new election for the Bloc, but there is a lot in a new election for the NDP. But this is not the poll the Conservatives really want to say. So this essentially what's happened is that the last election results have been reversed. We have the Conservatives at 41%, the Liberals at 41% ahead of the Liberals. That's about where things were in reverse on April 28th. Now, here's the poll that the Conservatives want to see. We need further evidence of this poll, or more polls like this before the Conservatives are going to be too excited about an election. This has the Conservatives 159 seats, still a minority government. Has the NDP doubling its seats from 7 to 14. Now, if the NDP think this is the poll for them, they would probably reach for it now. The problem for the NDP, they're in the middle of a leadership race. So that would mean the interim leader, Mr. Davies, would be the man that voters see throughout the campaign. And after the election, which the NDP obviously are not going to win, the NDP would then continue with their leadership contest and elect a new leader. I don't think the NDP are going to suddenly declare the leadership race over and we're going to have a vote on it next week. I don't think that's going to happen. The problem is, if my memory doesn't fail me, I looked this up previously. No major federal political party, and you can argue the NDP is no longer major, but it still has provincial governments across Canada. It's still a viable political force, put it that way. But no major political party has ever gone into a federal election without a leader or with just an interim leader. So that's problematic. Let's have a look at some of the other polls here, and I'm going to have to call these up. Hold on. Yeah. So look at this one. This is more. Very interesting. This has the Liberal leading the Conservatives. NDP up at 12, though. That's better than they've been doing for quite a while. We got more for you here. Here's polling Canada, federal polling averages. Liberals marginally ahead of 41% to 38%. NDP down in this poll. Let's have a look at another. Because believe me, what the parties do is number crunch every day. And that's what they're doing right now. They're thinking, are we going to support this budget or aren't we? So, all right. We didn't want that one. We'll get back to that one actually. Yeah, we'll get back to that one. So here's how it adds up. And I'm going to play it. Question period usually reveals a lot more about what party leaders are trying to convey going into another election than it has anything to do with answering questions or even posing questions. So let's have a look at this exchange between Pierre Poilievre and Mark Carney that preceded their meeting yesterday.
They're already.
Well, all right.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Never bought groceries lately.
Canadians, according to this Prime Minister, have never had it so good. If you're that single mother out there walking down the grocery aisle looking at prices rise before your eyes, if you're that senior choosing between eating and heating, if you're one of the countless Canadians who see that roasted coffee is up 41% since the Prime Minister took office, that nuts and seeds up 15%, that food price inflation is now
you're saying, why is the RCMP dumping garbage? Why are qualified police officers emptying a dumpster for the CFIA? The reason is, you go down to the bottom of this page, number 3, under agreements, a peace officer shall provide such assistance as an inspector or officer may request for the purpose of enforcing this act or the regulations. We're going to go through this in a deeper degree. But in the agreement, it's number 34 here. For the purposes of this act, the minister may enter into an agreement with any qualified person to perform such duties or functions as the minister may specify on such terms and condition as the minister may apply. Now, this is a memorandum of understanding. The notorious MOUs that you hear so much about. We're going to be going deeper into this, as I said, tomorrow. But what does this add up to? It means that the minister is the one conducting this operation, and I use that term loosely, at Edgewood, BC. And Edgewood, BC has become like a microcosm of the Mark Carney police state. That's what's going on here. And it is absolutely shocking, because I'm going to be calling up Blake Roberts again today. And I'd like him to go on the record with what he told me when I first contacted him after I was notified he produced that video. I'm going to show you a bit of that video again in a minute. But from the conversation I had with him the other day, he said that the garbage is taken from Edgewood, BC's Universal Ostrich Farm, taken up the road in these huge dump trucks. The dumpsters are loaded on the truck. Then they're taken to a gravel pit. Now, I mistakenly, I think yesterday, said that the garbage remained at the gravel pit. It does not. But this is why this is so incredibly mysterious, or at least convoluted and inexplicable to some degree. So they take the garbage to a gravel pit. They dump it there.
Canadians won an election.
It then goes to a local business. Now, I'm not going to mention that business until I have it confirmed. It's then transferred to a landfill site. Now, if there's any waste material in this garbage that's in any way toxic, in any sense of that word, it's infecting a local business, potentially, if I recall, a grocery store dumpster. So why is the RCMP doing it this way? Or why is the CFIA doing it this way? And this is what's so incredible. When the garbage leaves the gravel pit, it gets a police escort. It gets a police escort to the next site. And that's what makes, as far as these alarm bells go off for me when I hear this. And I find it very, very strange. I'm going to just show a little bit more of this video. I'm going to turn the sound down while I show it, because this remains for me irrefutable evidence that something strange is going on. I have to be very oblique and a little bit perhaps neutral in my choice of words. But the question remains, why are they doing this waste disposal in this fashion? I think we need answers to this. I really do think we need answers to this. Now, I'm going to go back. I'm going to go back to my X page here. There's a few other things I want to share with you there. And once again, I apologize for you two going down. It's not my fault. But these these things happen when you get into material like this. So anyway, I'm going to show a bit more of that video, but this is very significant. 76% of Canadians would rather pay $120 for groceries from Canadian farms than $100 for the same groceries from U.S. farms. Of that 76%, 70% said they'd rather spend $140 for groceries from Canadian farms than $100 for the same groceries from U.S. farms. All right, a lot of you might be saying, well, that's pretty stupid. No, it's all about reinvesting in your country. But moreover, if Canadians have that degree of confidence and support for Canadian farms, for Canadian agriculture, why is the Canadian government waging war against Canadian agriculture and Canadian farms? Now, you all watched most of you, I'm sure, watched my interview last week with the former Minister of Agriculture, Jerry Ritz. I've had Jerry on the show many times. In the past, we were talking not about ostrich farms because I don't think anyone would have believed the incident, the event, the saga, the crisis that's occurring at Universal Ostrich Farms would ever be possible in Canada. So we talked about how the Trudeau government at that time was waging war against Canadian farmers through regulations, through making the price of agriculture so expensive, for blaming farmers for greenhouse gas emissions. The carbon tax was in effect then. It was strangling farmers across the country, making it cost prohibitive to engage in agricultural production. So why are the Liberals doing this? Because they don't care what Canadians think. They're following the lead of their globalist masters. I encourage you to read this story that I wrote yesterday. This was posted last night in the Post Millennial. This is based on interviews I've done recently with Katie, as well as Jerry Ritz, the former Minister of Agriculture. And it's important to note that some people associated with this story are questioning the need to follow these trucks, to see what is in these dumpsters, to follow up at night as to what is going on at this farm. I think we need to do that. And I'm not going to criticize anybody for not doing that so far. Maybe they didn't have the resources. Maybe they weren't in a position to do so. But I think we need to follow more of these trucks, and we need to find out what is going on at night and get video evidence of it through night vision technology. Now, when I was in the Air Force, I remember wearing night vision goggles. The search and rescue technicians used to use them all the time. It's not new technology, but of course, it's been applied to videography. So you can get very good footage at night. And we need answers about what's going on there. And the job doesn't end at 6 o'clock. And we've got to look at more. Now, you know, Chris Dacey, who is probably the only journalist on scene right now, or the only independent journalist, citizen journalist, I guess you call him. Chris has been doing what he can, and I have to, commend the fact that he has taken some risks. I'm encouraging Chris to follow some of these trucks. Yeah, I know somebody was arrested the other day for following a truck. That is absolutely crazy. Yeah, there's some video.
Further secured. That would be the commander's vehicle right there with the Starlink on top. So as you can see behind me here, we have what looks to be a Super Save vehicle with a bunch of trucks on it. Quite a few RCMP behind me. That would be the gate to the Seas property, Garlic Girls property. And a whole bunch more fencing going in here around the pen. The ostriches from this pen were removed after Jim Kerr attempted to feed them, and he was arrested for that. They moved the ostriches out of here after, and now they're coming in with some more fencing. We have seen in other places where they put a black screen up on this fencing when they're done. So I'm not sure if this is related to the prior incidents or if this is furthering preparations for something something I don't really want to think about. What a scene. This is a family's farm. Being further sealed off. This is Canada. Not the Canada I remember I grew up in, though. Gonna keep an eye on things here, and I'll update if there's more.
Yeah. Please keep doing the good work, Chris. And I encourage you to get out there and do some more off the site if you can. I understand. I'm not there. Who am I to suggest anything? If I'm not prepared to go out there and put my butt on the line, well, maybe I shouldn't be offering advice. But I think we need to do that. And maybe I'll end up doing it myself to some degree. I think we have got to move on from this. So thank you. And we've got some new polls here. I think I showed these to you earlier. Yeah, this shows the Liberals at 39%, the Conservatives at 37%. So, yeah, we did show these polls here earlier. My apologies. We're trying to get the piece the show together because of a massive YouTube crash. So, yeah. So this is not necessarily good news for the Conservatives.
Well, it sounds like you're worried about maybe Canada going to another election. Is that a realistic possibility Canadians should expect?
We have a minority government, but we believe we have a mandate. And when I see opposition parties not ruling out the possibility of voting for the budget, that's starting to worry me. But I think it's them that are misreading the mood of Canadians. If an election is necessary, we would obviously, reluctantly, because we don't think Canadians want an election, but election there will be. It's the opposition parties who have that decision in their hands.
Why not accept the Bloc's demands?
Well, which ones? The one that said it's unimaginable that they vote for the budget, the negotiable demands, or the non-negotiable demands? It's pretty hard to follow.
What about the NDP?
You'll have to ask the NDP about the NDP.
Have you been having those conversations?
What I just said is that the Prime Minister has had conversations, Mr. Chopang has had conversations, other ministers have had conversations, and we will continue to listen to what they have to say.
Do you think opposition parties are bluffing?
I have no idea. You'll have to ask them.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Leader of your party made some comments in a podcast that I want to get your take on because it's actually about policing. The podcast, I believe, was taped October 3rd, posted yesterday. He was referencing the RCMP's decision not to pursue criminal charges against Justin Trudeau or other people in the government over their involvement in the SNC scandal. Mr. Poilievre characterized the leadership of the RCMP as, quote, despicable when it comes to enforcing laws against the Liberal government and accused them of covering up for Trudeau. Do you have proof of that?
Did you hear the taped audio between the Liberal Prime Minister's clerk of the Privy Council and former Justice Minister Jody Wilson-Raybould?
I'm surprised that you and I are having this conversation, but I'm just saying that I really feel uncomfortable and about the appropriateness of this conversation.
Okay, I understand that, but I think...
Now, I want to interject here because, of course, this is all about Pierre Poilievre making the comment on the broadcast Northern Perspectives about the RCMP leadership being despicable. So he's being attacked for saying that, and Pierre Poilievre is withdrawing from that comment because he's saying, oh, I didn't mean the current RCMP leadership. I was referring to Commissioner Lucky in the former Trudeau years. That's what he said he was referring to. So I don't think Pierre Poilievre needs to back away from his criticism of the RCMP leadership. Not when what's going on in Edgewood, BC continues, and not with the fact that the RCMP is more interested in doing operations against Canadian farmers than they are in stopping drugs at the Vancouver port. coming in and going out. Now we know fent, and I'll call it that. I can't say the whole word. We know fent is coming in to Vancouver ports via China, and it's going to laboratories in the interior of BC for processing. And that, of course, is something the RCMP don't want to get involved in. They have told the Drug Enforcement Agency in the U.S. to just pound sand. We don't want to cooperate with you. We don't want to work with you. Despite the fact that we are sending liquid meth from Canada to New Zealand, and people, at least one person has died as a result of drinking liquid meth, thinking it was a Canadian beer. There's a nice maple leaf on it. So that's been what's happening here. And I wanted to show you another clip from. Okay, we don't have that, but I do have an image here for you that I wanted to show you. This is very significant because we've talked about this before. Why do you think the Canadian Food Inspection Agency decided to rescind what they call a exemption or depopulation exemption? Depopulation is the CFIA's euphemism for killing livestock. They call it depopulation. Sounds very sinister to me. Sounds like the sort of words totalitarian regimes use to describe slaughtering things, people, animals, whatever. But very interestingly, it was within, and I'm going to show you the entire news release here, but I have to share the screen to do it. But this is very significant. This is very, very significant. I just have to get it up there. Sorry. Here we go. Flying by the seat of our pants today, folks, but that's how it is sometimes. And there we go. All right. Now, within weeks, literally weeks, of the CFIA rescinding its depopulation exemption for Universal Ostrich Farms, this news release came out of the federal government. This is still during the Trudeau years, just during the transition from Trudeau to Carney. I think they were still in the midst of a Liberal leadership campaign. But here it says, this is quite interesting. The Public Health Agency of Canada and its partners are focused on keeping people and animals in Canada safe. Yeah, that's why you're calling them all. And ensuring Canada is ready for any potential health threats. This includes taking proactive measures to protect the health of people in Canada by authorizing and securing the supply of a human vaccine against avian influenza as part of our readiness and potential use as needed based on risk conditions, leveraging an existing agreement. PHAC has secured an initial supply of 500,000 doses of GSK's human vaccine against avian influenza. Wow. This vaccine will be used as part of Canada's contingency planning to protect people who may be at increased risk. So, what does that tell us? The CFIA, or the PHAC, or the Liberal government, whether it was under Justin Trudeau or Mark Carney, is clearly not interested in any other alternative to avian flu except buying vaccines and potentially locking down again. And that's what worries all of us when we watch this, because they don't want to know if these ostriches develop herd mentality, if they had the antibodies that could potentially save human lives. That's the story the mainstream media has never wanted to report about this farm. This is not just about encroachment on private property, although that's incredibly important to the story. It's not just about the government trying to take and kill livestock. It's not just about the government trying to destroy a farmer's livelihood. All of this is very important and applicable to all of you, all of us in Canada. This story has tremendous ramifications and consequences for every Canadian. But here's the unseen aspect of this. The government has never been interested in approaching avian influenza in any other way except mass vaccination of the population and potentially the animals affected. That's what the government of Canada is doing here. They want another vax program. They want more lockdowns if they deem it somehow in the interest of what? Public health? That's how they always get away with this. So I bring that up because you're going to be hearing more about this mysterious rescinding of an exemption that was given by the CFIA to Universal Ostrich Farms in January 2025. And literally weeks later, the government of Canada decided it was going to announce the purchase from GSK of 500,000 vaccines. And I can guarantee you, although the date on that news release is from February, the government was preparing that news release in January, probably the same week the CFIA rescinded its exemption to Universal Ostrich Farms. And I think that's highly significant. So I want to thank you for watching today. We're going to have
Aiden's
more.
brother-in-law started dumping out the cans. Some were filled with beer, but not all.
And I was like, hey, wait, this looks like liquid glue that's coming out of this can.
Police raided the rented storage unit where Aiden's manager had been captured on camera removing cases of beer. An officer videotapes and describes the staggering scene they found inside.
It was very confined. I could barely walk around.
Towering pallets of beer made in Canada, complete with the Maple Leaf logo, and white crystals blanketing almost every surface. Buckets of it. 700 kilos of liquid meth being crystallized.
You have the right to remain silent.
Aiden Segala's manager, later convicted of manslaughter, was getting rid of the excess beer, not knowing some cans still contained meth. New Zealand is in the midst of a meth crisis, and shockingly, Canada is fueling that addiction. The two largest busts in New Zealand history both originated in Canada, hidden in beer and this.
These 713 kilos of meth came from Canada, hidden in maple syrup.
It's kind of sad in some ways that we keep coming and saying we're getting bigger and bigger seizures.
In 2023, New Zealand seized more meth from Canada than anywhere else in the world. In 2024, the most intercepts involved meth from Canada, 171, about 3 meth seizures from Canada every single week.
Just this tonnage coming our way out of Canada.
Detective Superintendent Greg Williams is the director of New Zealand's National Organised Crime Group.
You have a reasonably dynamic organised crime environment in Canada. From what we're seeing, the scale of it, you've got some really significant sophistication up there.
And coming up tomorrow, Avery follows the meth pipeline from Canada to New Zealand, chasing leads that police here did not follow.
Technical problem thing. Mike was muted. Why did I show that video to you at the end of the show here? Because I referenced it earlier in the show when I talked about why the RCMP should not be exempt from criticism. Why the RCMP leadership today, not Brenda Lucki, not just Brenda Lucki from the Trudeau years, but the current commissioner and the current RCMP leadership and the current RCMP activities and behavior and objectives and the way they work should be criticized today. Let's not go back to the Trudeau years and say, oh, everything's been cleaned up now. Pierre Poilievre needs to keep the spotlight on the RCMP because, as I said they're showing no interest in stopping these shipments of liquid meth to New Zealand and God knows where else, or stopping the importation of fent at Vancouver ports. They would rather go up to Edgewood, BC, and get overtime dumping trash on behalf of the CFIA. And as I said, God only knows what is in that trash. So do I sound a little upset about this? Damn right I am, because this is continuing. And yes, you have to criticize the RCMP if they're not doing their job, if they seem more interested, in oppressing a family farm and getting overtime and standing around, and they're not even taking this so-called health threat seriously, or maybe they'd have some masks on or some personal protective gear or the hazmat suits that the CFIA agents are waltzing around with, lassoing ostriches. It took them 48 hours to put those costumes on because somebody said, whoops, this isn't good for the PR. People are noticing the fact that we're not taking this exercise very seriously, or this operation very seriously, because we haven't even got our hazmat suits on. So it took them a couple of days to do that. It is a dead giveaway that this is a fraudulent exercise. This is completely without base, rationale, explanation. Well, not without explanation. It's about oppressing farmers. But there is no other explanation for this. This is about trying to put down notions, ideals, freedom. And people are fighting back, and we're going to continue to fight back, even when YouTube crashes in the middle of my show, because I am committed to getting the story out. And as I said, every day I'm going to continue to talk about the potential election, but that's why we need an election. It might have some bearing on what's happening in Edgewood, BC. Might, I don't know. Because the minister might just decide to have a hands-off approach and allow the CFIA to continue its dirty work. But if we don't get a new government in this country, as I've said every day, and it has to be said every day, and every opportunity I get on whatever show I appear on, I say Canada is facing 3 to 4 censorship and surveillance laws that are going to make Canada like the United Kingdom is today, where you can't say what you want on the internet without the government sending a cop to your door, potentially arresting you if your narrative doesn't agree with the government's narrative. Great Britain's the home of free speech. It's the home of the Magna Carta. It's where people fought over centuries for the precious right of free speech. It has been extinguished within the last year and a half, perhaps, of the Keir Starmer government. We can't allow that to happen to Canada or in Canada, but we are literally on the precipice of that happening. And this is why I think we do need a new election, because it might be the only way out of this mess. And I think Mark Carney is delusional enough to think he can win a majority, and I think he really is the prime motivator. He's going to blame the Conservatives. He's going to say, well, we didn't want an election as the Conservatives. I think Mark Carney wants an election because he doesn't like being in a minority. He doesn't like having to ask permission or favors from other political parties. He thinks he should be able to do whatever he wants, whenever he wants, as he pleases. And that's why potentially he's going to seek another mandate, this time thinking he'll get a majority government. I don't believe he can get that, but I hope he keeps thinking he can get that. Because if we don't change this government, this country is on a catastrophic path to tyranny. I don't say that lightly. I don't say that in a sense of just trying to alarm. I say that in the sense of absolute truth. I believe Canada is in serious, serious trouble. And Pierre Poilievre cannot get trapped into talking like Mark Carney II. as he did in the last election, where he parroted all of the talking points about Donald Trump being an existential threat to Canada, fighting the US. Mark Carney laughed at that. Mark Carney knew he was just kidding. That as soon as he became prime minister, he was going to get on bended knee to Donald Trump, because that's the reality. Mark Carney is going to try the same game plan again. He's going to try to entrap Pierre Poilievre into Mark Carney's election. Pierre Poilievre needs to stand strong on conservative principles, because otherwise the base will desert him, maybe perhaps in not huge numbers, but sufficient numbers to make this another Liberal victory. The answer is not to become more like the Liberal Party in any federal election. It's to become more like a small c conservative principled party, which I think Pierre Poilievre is capable of doing if he stops listening to the conservative establishment, the conservative communications department, and key figures in it who continue to want him to move to the left or to the center, and to stop talking to the grassroots and the conservative base. Anyway, thank you so much for watching today. And we'll be back again tomorrow, hopefully without any interruptions. Keep the faith, keep fighting, and keep resolving to resist. This has been David Krayden broadcasting to you very, very live from your nation's capital. Thank you for watching today. I'll be back again tomorrow.